The woes of Keir Starmer and his leadership after that reform victory in the council elections, the Runcorn by-election last week, and a lot of pressure on the party leadership there, indeed on the Tory leadership as well, over that threat from Nigel Farage. Well, numerous groups of sort of factions of MPs on the Labour benches are now getting together to say, look, we need to change tack. Red Wall Group, others, and they also include the Blue Labour movement, led by the Labour peer and founder of that group, Lord Glassman. He said that working class Labour voters have been frozen out of the party by the woke thought police, and the party created a hostile environment. It was impossible where people can just speak their minds. Well, let's talk about this with former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. Very, very good afternoon to you.
And to you, Judith.
Thanks for joining us. I mean, look, there's no problem speaking your mind on this show, but I'm certainly aware an awful lot of MPs over the years who do want to say things get frozen out. I mean, you know, you think about MPs talking about things, just simple things like grooming gangs, or indeed on the threat from trans women, trans-identified men entering women's spaces and taking women's rights. Certainly the Labour Party shut people out, but the big concern here is about ordinary voters just basically saying, I don't feel I can say what I want to say without someone shouting bigot, racist, transphobe or whatever at me, and I've had enough. And this is a party that doesn't represent me anymore. What would you say to that?
So I think there clearly is a perception from scores of voters across the country that Labour isn't on their side. That's how I would put it. I mean, it's interesting to reflect on this very special day when we're reflecting on VE Day, that just a few weeks later, Labour scored perhaps its greatest ever triumph with the election of the Attlee government. You know, there in the pictures is Clement Attlee standing next as Deputy Prime Minister, standing next to Churchill, on the balcony. So, you know, and what happened in 1945 was the country, for the first time, Labour's first ever majority, people thought the voters thought Labour was on their side. Clearly, last week, they didn't, and that is a job of work that the Labour Party has to do. I think there are many policies that Labour is pursuing that actually should demonstrate that, but that message certainly isn't getting across.
What are those policies? I'd love to know.
Well, I think investment in the NHS. I actually think respecting the court judgment on trans is one of those. I think common sense has been prevailed, and I hope.
I mean, you don't get brownie points for obeying the law. And they're not even obeying the law. They're allowing taxpayer-funded NHS hospitals and other organisations to flout the law, and they're still paying Stonewall to give them wrong advice.
About it. But look, I think that the biggest battle, I think, between what you might call common sense Labour versus activist Labour is going to be over the environment. It's going to be my old boss, Ed Miliband, and seeing what happens in terms of getting energy prices down so that we can ensure that we protect British jobs. And the government's going to be publishing an industrial strategy in the next few weeks. The key test for Starmer is whether that includes a commitment to lower energy prices for industry.
You can only lower energy prices. You know, we've gone, hammer and tongs on this many, many times. If you get rid of these net zero pledges, the fundamental thing is, it's almost as if the only way that Keir Starmer will either win voters back, I wouldn't say keep voters, he's already lost an awful lot of them, he's way down in the polls, is to win voters back, would be to basically drop all of the things that he apparently holds true to. Net zero, an awful lot of, the higher taxes, paying for all these things, also the policies on migration. He's a human rights lawyer in his heart of hearts. Most of his mates are making big money, paying for their lovely Islington dinner parties through the asylum system and the like, and all these appeals. He's going to have to kind of go against every natural instinct that he has on every policy if he wants to win back voters.
Well, I'm not sure that his natural instincts, I mean, are as you describe them. I mean, take migration. Labour's been very clear, migration, both legal and illegal, is too high. Now, the problem is we haven't seen delivery in terms of getting those numbers down. So, yes, look, there's a huge challenge to do that. If migration numbers are not down by the time of the next election, Keir Starmer won't be re-elected as Prime Minister.
I genuinely don't think he or Yvette Cooper or any of them actually do think figures are too high. They know that voters think they're too high. They don't personally think there's a problem.
Well, I tell you, the one person I think might not think that, and that's the Attorney General. Not the most glamorous job in government, not the person we hear about all the time, but he's the lawyer who serves the government and checks all the legislation before it can be enacted. And he is a human rights lawyer. His agenda seems to be out of kilter with what the majority of Labour opinion think. And I wonder if Keir's going to have the gumption to get rid of him at the reshuffle. That's what a lot of Labour MPs, whether they're badged Red Wall or something else, would like to see.
Well, it's interesting, all the different factions. One we sort of think when a Prime Minister gets elected, OK, not the biggest share of the voters he would have wanted, but a huge number of MPs, that actually, you know, you can do what you want. But actually, you've now got a lot of people know I'm never going to get a job in government. I can get away with voting against the government on various different issues. You get a lot of these different factions moving. And at the end of the day, most MPs want to make sure they can still pay their mortgage in 4 or 5 years' time. So their concerns are turning to that. We're seeing that in the Tories. I mean, it's fascinating. Kemi Badenoch, the newish Tory leader, she held a drinks party for Tory MPs yesterday. Only 25 of them turned up. I mean, there aren't many of them, but there are more than that. They're going to ring round saying, for God's sake, turn up. That is a mark of how dangerous her position is. Now, not as easy to oust Keir Starmer, and of course, no one's really thinking about who the alternative would be. But I have to say, I can't see him keeping Ed Miliband or indeed Rachel Reeves in the job, certainly for the next election. Do you think either of them survive?
I think Ed is probably in a more vulnerable position than Rachel. I think he's made a commitment to keeping Rachel for the duration of the Parliament. And also, I think if you get rid of Rachel, you're effectively getting too close to home in terms of the blame. I think Ed will have to either change his tone and change some of his actions.
Drop net zero.
Yeah. In terms of the wider issue, look, Julie, there is a big problem. Labour MPs up and down the country, many of whom were elected on tiny majorities, on fairly small shares of the vote, are looking like and thinking, you know, I'm going to be a one-term MP. Therefore, what do I do? Do I make a mark? Do I speak out? Do I try and, become a personality, etc.? So there's a huge political management problem if Labour doesn't start going up in the polls. So, yeah, Starmer's got a lot on his plate.
It absolutely does. Really good to talk to you. Thank you for speaking to us. Sir Matthew Laza, former Labour Party advisor. Philip Ingram, if you were advising this Prime Minister, what would you tell him to do?
He needs to start to do something, start to listen to the people. What's very clear is that the Labour Party have come into government with no plan whatsoever. They've had lots of political sound bites that they've been churning out over the years, and they thought that that's what the voters wanted to hear. The voters don't want. They want substance, and he needs to get some substance.
Yeah, and again, people are just simply not willing to put up with sort of promise on this and promise on that, because we've had that from the Tories for years and not delivered. So the people are very wisely, I think, rather distrustful. It's interesting, of course, Reform capitalising on that because they haven't actually been in office, so they haven't got a track record to defend or broken promises. And love Nigel Farage, love a lot of their policies. At the end of the day, though, when you're in office, to govern is to choose.
Yeah. The one thing Keir Starmer is doing much better than the Tories is he's not delivering better.
Wonderful summary, wonderful summary.